I was rinsing the last of the salad dressing into a Tupperware at the kitchen sink when my mother mentioned it as casually as if reciting the weather. "We've run out of oat milk once more. Would you mind picking some up after work?" Without glancing up, I snapped the lid shut and inquired, "Is that for you or for my sister's hormones?" She didn't crack a smile. "If it's about my sister, my mother never does." "It's actually for her tea," Ellen replied, folding the grocery list as neatly as a church program. "She has to unwind before her flight." I froze. "What flight to Akureyri?" "Didn't she mention it to you? It's for her women's retreat. Norway." Chilly air helps reset my mother's cortisol, apparently. The water kept flowing from the tap and my hands were soaking. I turned to face her, moving deliberately. She was traveling to Norway. My mother blinked at me as if I'd said something bizarre. "Just a handful of days. Wellness retreat. It's supposed to be completely holistic. I've been beyond tense recently." I thought about it. Norway? A retreat? Holistic? Tense? That's exactly how I describe myself. Not reckless, not someone without a job for 22 months. That's not the real reason I've been managing the mortgage, the groceries, the phone bills, the utilities, and apparently now the oat milk for Norwegian hormonal wellness. How does she manage to afford it? "She won a prize," Ellen blurted. "Some sort of online contest or drawing?" "Naturally, she did. She supposedly landed a getaway to Norway through an online raffle." I echoed her answer. "That's right." A brief silence followed. "Try not to sound so doubtful," I reminded myself. My mother could really use something positive right now. I took my time drying my hands, and the edge of the dish towel snagged on my ring. "When I was promoted to team lead 2 years ago, I told you. You offered congratulations, and then immediately wondered if I could help out with the water bill. That was all you had to say." My mother's expression grew more tense. "That's not right," I stated. "I agree. It isn't," I replied. From down the hall, the sound of keys reached my ears. My sister, Morgan Westmore, swept into the kitchen as though it belonged to her alone. She wore the parka I bought her for Christmas 2 years ago, the same one she once called dull. Yet she looked absolutely stunning. She pulled open the refrigerator. "Where's the oat milk?" she asked. I didn't respond. My mother handed me a piece of folded paper. "You're going to buy some," she said. My sister gave our mother's cheek a quick kiss. "Thank you, sis," she tossed out, never meeting my eyes. Without another word, she glided out the door. I watched as the door shut in her wake. The quiet that followed felt even heavier than before. I believed she was out of money. I insisted my sister deserved the getaway. My mother answered me. "You have no idea how difficult it's been for her, stuck at home all day," my mother explained. I kept my thoughts to myself. Water still poured from the faucet. I let it run, sensing on some level that things weren't right. It wasn't just this vacation or the oat milk. Something had felt wrong for quite some time. I just wasn't ready to be the person who confronted it. At least, not yet. But that situation was about to change. The following morning, I looked up Retreat Norway raffle just to check if it actually existed. It turned out to be fake. I wasn't shocked by this discovery. Later, I brought it up to my mother again over dinner in a casual way. She was warming up a pre-made meal and pretending she had cooked it from scratch, just as she always did when she was trying to appear in control at home. I asked, "So what sort of raffle was it?" My mother paused for a moment, then lowered her eyes to the microwave as if it had just made an odd remark. "Just some travel sweepstakes," she replied. "You know how my sister is with all those contests online. She's always signing up for something." I chewed a piece of bland meatloaf and gave a slow nod. "That's odd. She kept quiet about it. Usually she likes to boast about those things." My mother, Ellen Westmore, shot a glance my way. She probably wanted to spare my feelings. I had really been pushing myself recently. That was a fresh kind of care from her. I'm not bothered, I replied. And truly, I wasn't. Just weary. I was weary of being seen as the family's backup power source. Steady, constant, only acknowledged if something went wrong. On the following morning, Summit Crest Finance reached out to me by phone. I was in the middle of a meeting when their number popped up on my cell. I hesitated for 2 rings before picking up. Instinctively, I knew not to let it go. "This is Gina Lambert from Summit Crest Finance," the woman introduced herself in a courteous yet no-nonsense tone. "We're reaching out to confirm some actions on your card." I exited the room to continue the conversation. "What sort of actions?" I inquired. "Several significant transactions originating from Akureyri, Norway," she explained. "Luxury hotels, spa treatments, retail purchases. We're just making sure while you're traveling." I shut my eyes. "No," I told her. "I'm not going anywhere." There was a moment of silence on her side. "Would you prefer to put a hold on the card?" "Yes," I answered right away. $18,500. That was the total charge to my gold card in under 4 days. I flipped through the detailed statement she sent to my inbox. Boutique hotel, private guide, hot spring spa, 4 different eateries, and 1 entry for Aurora Ridge Air Tours. I sent the list to myself, then made a printout at my house. I left the documents on the kitchen table where my mother always read her newspaper. I chose not to mention it to anyone. Later that night, I returned to find the living room unusually peaceful. My mother was folding clothes with pointed intent. My father, who usually kept quiet unless ESPN was on, cleared his throat. She wasn't trying to do any harm, he offered. I stayed silent. The card had simply been sitting there. "I always forget it on the counter," my mother interjected. She didn't mean it maliciously. I lifted the sheet off the table and examined it. $18,500 in 5 days? She believed it was about to run out, my mother said hurriedly. She didn't want to let it go unused. I looked at her intently. She claimed that I had asked. My mother hesitated somewhat. I remained silent, grabbed the sheet, and went up to my room. My sister's voice sounded cheerful on the voicemail. "Hey sis," she greeted me. "It seems the card doesn't work anymore. Can you sort that out? I haven't reserved the ice cave tour yet. Love you." She ended the call without giving me a chance to answer. I didn't inform them immediately that the card was blocked. They figured it out the following morning when my sister phoned from the hotel lobby. My mother was in the living room, making herself a 3rd cup of coffee for the day. Her mug displayed the words, "Grateful Heart" on the front. She said her card wouldn't go through. Ellen pressed her phone to her ear as she spoke. I kept my eyes fixed on my laptop screen. "No, that's not the case," I heard her say. Ellen blinked in surprise. "You shut it off," I replied. "I reported it as missing." My father, Richard Westmore, spoke up from his recliner. "That feels a bit extreme," I answered. "She took it without permission. That's stealing, as far as I know." My mother, Ellen Westmore, responded in a strained tone, "You always take things too far." My sister Morgan Westmore called out once more. I ignored her call. She left a voice message. "Wait, you actually canceled it?" "I have reservations, Samantha." "That's so wildly childish. I was planning to buy you something." For some reason, that last comment made me chuckle. Maybe it was the way she said it. So certain, as though a souvenir t-shirt could excuse $18,500 spent without any sign-off. Later that day, my mother tapped on my bedroom door. It had been years since she'd done that. "We have to discuss this," she told me. I closed my laptop. She entered the room and took a seat, looking as though she still had the presence that could control the space. She was stuck there. She was staying at a luxury hotel. She doesn't have any money for meals. Last night she had truffle risotto for dinner. The meal is right there on the bill. She's my sister. There it is again. That same dependable narrative. The duty owed to family. The oldest daughter serving as the backup plan. I pulled my shoulders back. Do you remember when I was attending university and developed a stomach ulcer because I was juggling 4 part-time jobs? My mother, Ellen Westmore, seemed uneasy. You're going to mention that right now? I called you in tears. I explained that I needed help to pay an emergency hospital fee, $2,800. An awkward hush followed. You responded that my sister needed orthodontic work more. I watched as my mother laced her fingers together. Things were different back then. It was always a different era. In that instant, she appeared aged. She looked not only exhausted, but somehow revealed. It was as if the creases by her eyes came not just with age, but from wearing a facade for so long. After that, she did something I truly did not see coming. She extended her hand toward me and placed it gently on top of mine. I heard my mother say, "We haven't always been fair to you." I realized that, her voice soft. Yet she continued, "But right now, Morgan really needs you." I didn't move my hand, but I also didn't give her any agreement. My mind wandered to the message on my phone, the receipt, and how Morgan simply said, "Fix it," as if I were some customer service agent instead of her sister. I was reminded of when I turned 16, how they gifted my sister a car while I received a savings bond instead. I also remembered when my sister took the money I had set aside for rent to launch what she called a business, then used some of it on concert tickets. My thoughts shifted to the house, and the deed tucked in the drawer, the one that my father, Richard Westmore, transferred to me 9 years ago after he couldn't keep up with property taxes. The arrangement couldn't have been clearer. I would make the payments, and ownership would be mine. All these memories cycled through my mind, and at last, I gave a small smile. "All right," I responded. My mother lifted her eyes to me, her face caught somewhere between astonishment and relief. "You'll help." I rose from my seat and walked to the dresser, slid open the top compartment, and pulled out another card, sleek and untouched, with a dark finish. "This one hasn't been cut off," I said as I handed it over. "Get her anything she requires." She accepted it as though it meant absolution, as if everything had fallen back into place. I watched her go before grabbing my phone to call someone I hadn't contacted in quite a while. "Grandma, are you still needing assistance in the kitchen at Sunrise Table?" I asked. The following 4 days brought an odd sense of stillness. Morgan's messages became less frequent after she left her third-to-last voicemail. She seemed to shift from upbeat to irritable, and then to a sort of disguised regret. She didn't actually offer an apology, but her weary sighs and lingering silences made it clear that she believed that was enough. My mother, Ellen Westmore, began to move with gentler gestures, steering her offers with quieter suggestions instead of commands, like the way she would present a cup of coffee as soon as I returned home. The questions about how my day at work had been were quick, never lingering for my reply. As for myself, I would simply smile. I would give a nod. My response was just, yes. I offered them a card. It wasn't the Summit Crest Finance one any longer. That card had already vanished, dead and buried. Instead, this one was black and more recent. I'd had it tucked away in my drawer for well over a year. I received it after an event with a client, but I had never once used it. I went ahead and activated it, placed a spending cap on it, and then gave it to them. "There are still a few expenses she needs to take care of," I said in a flat tone. "Plane tickets, food, whatever might come up." My mother, Ellen Westmore, seemed as if she'd been given another opportunity. She didn't mention the change in color of the card. She didn't question why I had only now activated one I hadn't touched in ages. She didn't bring up anything at all. That was the sign to me that my mother was still keeping to her script, and she assumed I was doing the same. My sister Morgan, texted the following evening. Credit cards active. You're amazing. I've got a surprise for you when I return. I didn't reply. Instead, I filled 4 boxes and arranged for movers to come the following Thursday. Just clothing, books, documents, what was truly important. Everything else could be left behind or forgotten. The following morning, I phoned the realtor. She introduced herself as Gina Lambert. We'd crossed paths once at a professional mixer 4 years ago. Gina recalled me and wanted to know if the home was still in good condition. I admitted that I was finally prepared to move on. She only needed to be aware that the title was under my name, that I alone had authority to sign, and that I'd vacate by Saturday. Gina Lambert mentioned that a purchaser had been hoping for a listing on this street for several months. We agreed on a time to view the place together. While sorting through the garage, I uncovered the tax transfer paperwork my father had completed. Those papers had stayed with me in an old folder labeled temporary, which I had never bothered to relabel. Upstairs, I took down the framed family photograph that hung in the hall, the one from Christmas 9 years ago. My image had been cut off at the side, showing nothing but a sliver of my shoulder. That used to irritate me. But now I understood. I was never truly included in the scene, only standing close enough for my shadow to appear. I kept my decision to leave to myself. For the time being, I told no one. I put the house key beneath a stone in the garden for the movers. I labeled every box. Kitchen records. Must stay. Afterward, I got in my car and headed to my grandmother's place. When I arrived, she opened the door as if she had been expecting me. Without asking anything, she gave a small nod and a faint smile that didn't quite light up her face. I have 4 rooms, Dolores announced, clearly indicating she had little tolerance for foolishness. I responded with a simple smile. Just right. As I walked in, I was met by the mingled scents of flour, tomatoes, and aged wood. The sounds coming from the kitchen were noisy and bustling, full of shouted instructions, yelling in both English and Spanish, and sometimes a blend of the two. Sunrise table was just as it had always been, and the guidelines were unchanged. Are you set? She inquired. Not quite, I replied, though I knew I would be. She dried her hands with a towel and met my gaze directly. They'll arrive. When that happens, I'll take care of it. I know that. And I followed through. They returned on a Thursday, just after lunch. The sky was half clouded, and the sound of their rolling suitcases on the path felt like an omen. I hadn't gone inside the home. I waited out on the porch swing. Morgan Westmore stepped out of the car first, grinning as if we were sisters who actually kept in touch. You're here to pick us up. I didn't reply. My father hauled out the luggage. My mother dug in her purse for the house keys. She attempted the lock. Then she tried it a second time, peering at me in confusion. Did you update the door code? No, I answered. I replaced the lock. She looked startled. Why, you don't live here anymore? She asked, giving one of those short, brittle laughs she relied on whenever she was uneasy. Samantha, seriously. I rose carefully, descended the steps, and passed her a manila folder. Enclosed were the finalized closing forms, the sale confirmation, and the bank wire receipt. Gina had acted with impressive speed. The new owners would be arriving on Wednesday. I sold it, I told her. Morgan's brow creased. Sold what exactly? The house. Her expression crashed, as if something precious slipped from her hands. You can't just do that, she retorted. That's against the law. This is my father's property. My father, Richard Westmore, opened the envelope. His complexion turned ashen before he'd gotten halfway through the papers. I transferred the deed to him 9 years ago, I answered softly. Didn't he remember when the IRS showed up? He started to speak, then shut his mouth and lowered himself onto the curb, as if he were desperate for a breath. My mother's tone grew sharper. That was not your decision to make. I met her gaze, and for the first time in many years, I didn't recoil. I settled the owed property taxes myself. I have been responsible for covering the mortgage payments, all the utilities, upkeep, and any necessary fixes. Over the past 7 years, I've worked hard to ensure this house remained intact. All you did was occupy it. Morgan stepped closer. So, now where are we meant to stay? I handed her another envelope. When I broke the seal, I found an address, some house keys, and a sticky note written in my grandmother Dolores Westmore's handwriting. Room upstairs. Work starts at 6. Apron on by 5:15. My mother, Ellen Westmore, gazed at the note as if it were a cipher. You sent our belongings to your grandmother's. No, I replied. I sent your things to your mother, and she's agreed to let you stay. As long as you do your part, Morgan sneered. Do you actually think she's going to boss me around? She's been managing that since before I ever arrived. My father, Richard Westmore, finally joined the conversation. And what about the card? I looked at him. Which card do you mean? The black one. The one we had used before. Oh, I replied. That wasn't mine. My sister tensed up. What? That card was yours, I explained, looking her in the eye. You set it up 2 years ago and left it behind in a drawer when you left that copywriting job. I've never once used it, she shot back. Well, you have now. She glanced at the document she held, then looked back at me. You're not telling the truth. I kept silent. The moving van arrived in the driveway. The new homeowners got out, a young couple, holding a baby and with a dog, all smiling. I turned away to face my relatives. You have 5 days to clear out of my grandmother's guest rooms. My mother's lips parted and then shut. I didn't stick around for her response. I made my way to my car, turned it on, and drove away. There was no farewell, no final words. The home was already lost to us. And so was I. For a while afterward, everything remained very still. There were no phone calls, no messages, no late-night visits on my door. Just quiet. I settled into a modest apartment on the far side of the city. Nothing luxurious. 2 rooms, gentle lighting, and no neighbors sharing my walls. It's the kind of quiet I didn't realize I'd been craving until it was finally mine. My job became busier. I no longer checked my account balance several times a day. The sound of my phone ringing stopped making me wince. I picked up flowers for my kitchen table just because I liked their color, not for a special occasion. Then one morning, my grandmother called. She never opens with pleasantries. They're getting used to things, she told me. I didn't ask who she meant. My mother, Ellen, washes pans a bit slower than I'd prefer, but she's managing. My father, Richard, has learned how to fold napkins, though not well, and my sister, Morgan, has finally learned how to clock in punctually. I kept quiet. My grandmother, Dolores, let out a breath. They're not perfect, but they've changed. Certain things can only be mastered through effort. That evening, I lay awake, not because I felt remorse, but anticipation. The kind you carry unknowingly until someone spells it out for you. The following week, I dropped by Sunrise Table. I didn't plan to speak, just to observe. The rear entrance stood ajar. The familiar aromas, garlic, oil, yeast, wrapped around me like an old jacket I'd forgotten about. Peering through the kitchen window, I spotted them. Morgan wiped counters, her hair pulled back and her sleeves pushed up. Richard arranged paper menus into tidy piles. My mother, Ellen, had her hands immersed in soapy water, her lips pressed together in a thin line. Not a single one of them raised their head. I chose not to enter. I only stood and watched, not out of resentment or sympathy, but simply with understanding. They looked like individuals finally expected to carry their share. And for the first time, Nobody turned to me for money. I headed back toward my car. Later that week, I received a letter penned by hand, my name written in an old-fashioned script I hadn't seen since I was a child. The message inside held a single sentence: "You were right. I just didn't want you to be." My mother, Ellen Westmore, offered no apology, only those words. That was all I needed. I carefully refolded the paper and tucked it away into a shoebox alongside a handful of other items I still hadn't discarded. There was a faded photograph, a birthday card from my grandmother, Dolores Westmore, and the receipt showing I'd settled the back taxes the year my family nearly lost the house. I felt no tears and no smile, and just set the lid back in place. A season went by. The weather shifted. Occasionally, news about my family would reach me secondhand, either from my grandmother, Dolores, or someone I knew from church. My sister Morgan picked up a second job. My father, Richard Westmore, finally repaired Sunrise Table's persistent plumbing problem. My mother, Ellen, began baking once more. None of this stirred up any strong feelings in me. It was just a gentle sense, maybe, that things were starting to even out. Life seemed to have stabilized. One Saturday, I found myself passing the old family house. There was fresh paint and new blossoms in the yard. A tricycle sat in the driveway. I kept going and didn't pause. I moved forward without hesitating, since this wasn't about reclaiming something lost. My focus was on escaping before I disappeared completely, determined that no one would ever wipe away my existence again.